Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. As today we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on the 4th episode of the newest and most anticipated Walking Dead spin-off series. Following Michonne and her search for Rick Grimes, and of course, following Rick Grimes himself, while he tries to coincide and eventually escape the grasp of the CRM. Of course, being The Walking Dead The Ones Who Live. And the 4th episode being titled, What We. The title of this episode will go along with the title of the 5th episode as well, which is going to be Become. So put together, the 2 episode titles will be What We Become, a callback to Michonne's final episode in the original series, which was also titled What We Become. Before I get into the breakdown for this episode though, I wanted to first just say thank you for all of the support on my most recent Morgan Jones sort of theory video. Seeing all of my fellow Walking Dead fans have great conversations and theorize with each other is why I love making these videos. So a huge thank you to you all. I'll be sure to make more unique videos just like that, so expect to see more nerdy theories. Anyways though, the 4th episode of the series starts off immediately where the previous one left off. Right after Michonne grabbed Rick and pulled the two of them straight out of the helicopter during the storm, where they safely landed in some water and right by a building where they spend the entire episode in. The tension between Rick and Michonne is still pretty high, and that continues throughout most of this episode as well. They still do not see eye to eye on all of this, and Rick still just wants to return to the CRM. So Michonne pulled them away for a timeout. As she says, it was needed. While they get settled in, Michonne gets rid of her CRM uniform and Rick notices the X scar on her back. But this time he does not comment or ask about it. This does get explained to him later on, however, but we know that this is from episode 14 of season 9 of The Walking Dead, titled Scars, when Michonne reunited with an old world friend known as Jocelyn, who ended up betraying her and Alexandria as a whole. Michonne looks around this old high-tech sort of apartment, grabbing old poetry books and then scoffing at Rick, saying since he's such an author now, he should write a poem, and this time to write it for their children, that he doesn't want to even try returning to in her mind. However, Rick does notice here that she said children and not just Judith. So finally, Michonne tells Rick about RJ, who is of course named after Rick himself, telling Rick that she was actually pregnant when the bridge happened. She also tells him of how RJ and Judith both tell stories of the brave man, which is of course Rick. But even after learning that he has another child, he still just wants to go back to calling a helicopter to their location and go back to the CRM. He's way too worried about the threat that could follow them leaving, as he explains Jadis's plans to wipe Alexandria out if they do go, and her files on them if she is killed. He also reveals to Michonne that Jadis was the one to bring him here in the first place, as she found him on the riverbank after the bridge happened. Even after discovering that the helicopter that they were in crashed into a building during the storm, and this would make it look like they actually died, Rick still says no to leaving. Michonne has had enough, so she's out. She grabs some weapons, including a lamp pole that resembles that of a bow staff. If you know, you know. And she storms out of the room. She stops in the hallway and waits to see whether or not Rick will follow her or just let her go. But he sits on the other side of the door, breaking down and contemplating whether or not to follow her. But he takes too long and she just keeps walking. Right as a CRM helicopter approaches, Rick walks out of the room and chases after Michonne. This new helicopter opens fire on the crashed one and the entire building. They do this to destroy any and all evidence of their existence to the rest of the world. And right as the missiles hit the building and it starts to fall apart, Rick saves Michonne and the walkers start storming the building. So even though they aren't getting along right now, the two have to work together to find an exit. And something I noticed after the two ran through the hallway after the initial explosions is Michonne has a slight but noticeable cough. Rick even questions whether she's okay or not. Now I wonder if this cough is actually from the chlorine gas that she had to deal with Nat. Anyways though, the two make it into this gym room where Michonne reads off an old note from someone who worked at this old settlement, which was known as Greenwood. They had dreams of building something different here, but obviously it failed. The note reads off something along the lines of sometimes the way you want to fight back doesn't always work. And Michonne says it sounds familiar, referring to Rick's ways of combating against the CRM. Here, the two argue even more and worse. Honestly, you yourself watching the show could get upset with the way Rick is acting and treating this entire situation, although he does have his reasons. Michonne is growing angrier and Rick is just hurting her. She feels guilty for not being with her kids right now and doesn't even know how they are doing, as Judith stopped speaking through the walkie some time ago. But actually neither of them know how things are going back home or how people are doing. They actually are not aware of the Commonwealth, of Maggie's return, or of some of the death and destruction that has happened since their departures. And once again, this also adds onto the fact that they do not know about Alexandria and how it is just a Commonwealth outpost now. Everyone they love is actually staying elsewhere in a much larger and more powerful community and safe haven at the City of the Commonwealth. Jadis is also not aware of this. So I honestly would not be surprised if Alexandria, which is just an outpost now, actually does get destroyed eventually by the CRM. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore, so I wouldn't be shocked if it does actually happen. Rick and Michonne have to get out of there, however, as the building is collapsing even more. So they gear up, and once more, Michonne picks up a weapon that would resemble a bow staff or something like it. Again, if you know, you know. That's twice in one episode as well, just to add onto the possible Morgan teases. The two angrily make their way through the hallways, taking out walkers together until a chandelier collapses and leaves Michonne trapped. She tells Rick to just go, but he refuses to leave her side. And they eventually get away and back into the apartment room. And this is where things get very, very emotional. After the two finally stop arguing, they spend some time with each other and just talk. Once again, Rick notices the X scar on Michonne's back, and she finally explains that to him, and how she had to deal with her old friend. Unfortunately, it was very traumatic for her, as she ended up having to kill children that were practically brainwashed by Jocelyn. She also name drops Daryl here, as he was in that episode and went through it as well. Now the room they are staying in is starting to fall apart, but Michonne refuses to leave. Just like Nat said, you have to know when to go. And it's not time to go yet, not until Rick tells her what the CRM truly did to him and what they have taken from him. After some budging, Rick finally opens up to her about everything. He says that they took Carl and he lost him all over again. He tells the story of how he used to meet with Carl in his dreams every single night, and that's what kept him going. But one day he just stopped showing up. And then the same happened to Michonne in his dreams as well. Without Michonne, he dies, he says, and this all was just super emotional, and if anything ever actually happened to Michonne, I think we can all agree that Rick would absolutely lose it and completely lose himself. This is exactly why the phone artist could never get Carl's drawing right for Rick, because Rick had forgotten what Carl even looked like. But Michonne does, of course. So, surprise, surprise, Michonne pulls out one of the phones and gives it to Rick. It's a drawing of Carl. She encourages Rick even more and questions what Carl would say and do, and what he would want them to do in this situation. Rick has finally returned. The two agree with one another finally, and they leave the building before it collapses. And when they get into a car, Rick says, "We can make this whole damn world ours if we want to." Something Michonne would say, or has said already. Rick's original demeanor, or swagger you could say, is finally back. He seems confident, happy, and ready to get back home to his family. And as the two smile at one another and drive off with the intention to get back to Alexandria and their family and friends, the episode ends off. And oh my gosh, this episode was truly a masterpiece. A downtime sort of episode where we lock ourselves in just one place with just two characters, connecting with them and bonding with them even more than we already have. An episode with nothing but absolutely incredible storytelling and writing, and extremely emotional scenes and dialogue. And by the way, Denai Guerrera actually wrote this entire episode, and man was it mind-blowingly good. I think for me, writing-wise, this episode was actually a top 10 episode of all time for the entire Walking Dead franchise. If Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera don't at least get nominated for some kind of awards for their performances here, something is seriously wrong, because they go absolutely above and beyond. The mentions of Carl were also spectacular, especially knowing how much fans miss his character. I'm just glad we at least get some sentimental mentions to him just like this. However, there is quote unquote only 2 episodes left in this entire series. But with them already heading back home and Jadis definitely on their trail, this story is not ending by episode 6. I think they will have to deal with Jadis and then actually return to the CRM and deal with it as a whole. Michonne even says in the teaser that this does not end with them going back home yet. I mean, Beale has hardly been seen in this entire season, and he's basically supposed to be this big bad. I think that Jadis is this season's villain really, and Beale will be built up even more for a second season that will be announced after the final episode in 2 weeks. At least one can hope. But overall, this episode was genuinely amazing, and for me, it was like a billion out of 10 if I had to rate it. I absolutely loved this one, and I cannot wait for the 5th episode next week. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least, but of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on the episode as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, don't forget to give it a like, and with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.